Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor P. And I'm your host, as always, Professor P. And today we're going to discuss mysterious and important work. Okay, let's do the real thing. Welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host, as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to talk about math and Severance, an awesome show that actually lives up to its hype or the hype, either way. Um, so here's how the video is gonna go. I'm gonna talk about how math is used in different ways throughout Severance, both in universe and on the meta level. And I'm definitely gonna be talking about Severance as a whole. There will absolutely be spoilers. Assume all the spoilers just to be safe, all right? And there might be a theory or two. We'll see. I'm gonna try to not get too carried away, but I make no promises at all. So, again, spoilers ahead, just to be safe. Assume all the spoilers about everything Severance. And let's get into it. Okay, so with Severance, again, spoilers ahead. I just because you don't want spoilers for the show if you can avoid them. So, but yeah, okay. So with Severance, it is a fascinating show that I've been hearing about for a very, very long time, and I wanted to see early on, but life happened. And now, as it would happen, right, I wanted to see it, and then a lot of people were talking about the second season. And so, been trying to see it for like 3 years, and I happened to like take spring break, and I was visiting some family. They had Apple, TV Plus, and so it was like yes. And that week that I watched it was the week that they were in the last episode of season two. So it's like yes, I binged it. I binged it hard, or if you prefer old school terms, I marathon the crap out of that show. Um, anyway, so with Severance, let's get into it. So to begin, let's just talk about Severance in general. It's an inherently mathematical thing. You hear early on that it's described as a bifurcation of the consciousness. Bifurcation is an inherently mathematical thing, right? You're breaking things into two parts. And in this case, it's a bonkers thing, right? Because the idea is, you have your any and your outie. Your any goes to work for those 8 days. Once they're in the building, they're doing their thing. They don't have really any like major memories of like who they were. They still remember things like muscle memory and how to talk and things like that, but they don't remember who they are or who they are outside, right? And so they're doing their thing. They're working and making money, and as they're doing that, their outie doesn't have any recollection of what they do in there, at least on a conscious level, right? Um, and so, yeah, severance is an inherently mathematical thing. And honestly, work in general is, right? You're dealing with time, you're dealing with money, you're dealing with so many different things. And then if we take it further, and remember, I said spoilers ahead, so back out if you want. But like, I wanted to talk about something that happens a bit later, or something that starts out early and leads into something later. Because one of the bigger points of the show is like, for our main people that we follow that are on the severed like floor, right? We follow Mark S, Dylan G, I think Irvin B. Oh, God, I was blinking on the last name, but and then Hallie R, and that we'll get to some of their stuff later on. But they're the four main people that we're following, and they're overseen by Miss Colwell and Mr. Milchek throughout the series. With sorry, my ice maker is going, and I forgot to turn it off. Okay, so it just stopped, but the timing was good because it looked like I just waved it off. I mean, it's way out there, but it looked like I used the force. But this is not a Star Wars video. Okay, so in any case, right? So we have the four main people that we follow in their offices, macro data refinement. And so it's like, well, what do they do? So it's not really super clear at first, but over the course of the series, what they're doing is they are looking at the screens and they're feeling out the numbers, right? They're bombarded with numbers, and certain numbers will jump out, and like maybe some feel horrifying, right? Or maybe some spark joy. So they're reacting to these numbers, and as they're reacting to these numbers, they're sorting them out and they're placing them in bins. So it's like, they have 5 bins, and they're placing the numbers in there and completing files as they do this. Um, and so, what does that lead to, though? So, and this is what I meant earlier when I said, like, I'm going to talk about some things that eventually get revealed later that start off early. And again, spoilers. I'm sorry I keep saying that, but I'm not sorry because it's like, just be safe. But I'll probably cut back because I don't want to keep on saying it. But I might say it anyway. I don't know. I had a plan for this video, and I'm going to go with that plan. But I'm also feeling like pretty energetic today. I mean, I am most days, but I'm hyped up because I dig Severance, and I'm just also feeling better than I was like all of last week. So anyway, right? They're completing files, right? And you know, for Mark as the de facto main character, he's been working there for 2 years, and the idea is like he's building up to his 25th file by the end of season 2, and it's just like it's a wild thing because it turns out, right, they've been as they've been doing these files, they've been kind of responding to elements of his wife, who he thought was dead in his Audi form, which is why he even agreed to severance in the first place. So they're really looking at parts of Gemma, who has been stored in Lumen, like she's Miss Casey, right? So each file that was completed by them, that like Mark has been largely focusing on, has been an any persona for Gemma, and this is a bonkers thing, right? Because like for most of the series up until that point, right? Like we've seen just like a person has an any, and that was kind of it, right? But Gemma's different, and so it gets to be like very very fascinating in seeing like how all of that unfolds because right we've seen like these 4 workers in macro data refinement, and we've seen them responding to the numbers on the screen, and of course it's math in action. And we've been seeing like how that builds up, right? Also, side note, not to go off of a tangent too much, but like there are different types of numbers out there, and that's just the thing that right? Like but like if you focus in on like number theory, right? Like there's different numbers that have kind of funny names. Like then they have definitions, but like you have happy numbers, friendly numbers, amicable numbers, sad numbers, evil numbers, things along those lines, and you should definitely look into all of that. But the idea is like I found that concept of them responding to different numbers fascinating because I thought about some of those like numbers from number theory, right? Like, and I thought, hey, that's pretty cool because we have things like that, but they don't. They're not representing the actual emotion, right? Like, although you may feel how you feel about different numbers. And when I was thinking about how they were acting like different numbers and stuff like that, it also reminded me of synesthesia because like I know some friends who have that, and like a few who have like the number kind. And that just it made me think of that, and you should look into that too if you get curious. So in any case, right, the idea of severance and the idea of what they're doing in macro data refinement, these are inherently mathematical things, right? And of course, if you look at math and how it's used in the real world on the academic level and in the universal sense, this plays a role too. Because say on the academic level, right, we are dealing with numbers as we come to know them, the calculations, the estimation. We're dealing with the vocabulary, right, the language side of things, the problem solving side of things. And what that really is at the end of the day is an extension, right? It's a small fraction of a much larger whole because math, in the universal sense, is what we're doing. There's never a point where we're not doing math. We live in a universe of shapes and of motion. There's never a point where you're not doing math. It extends from the subatomic, like all the way down, branching out to the cosmic, from the infinitesimal to the infinite. There's math at every conceivable level. And when we think about math as we know it in that academic sense, in that traditional sense, it's an extension of what we're doing, so that we can say something about the past, the present, the future, so we can use what we know about the universe. And so, in that sorry on that basic level, these things show up and Severance. And so it could be anywhere from going to a job, putting in the time and making money, inherently mathematical things. But it could be those things themselves, like we mentioned with what macro data refinement does. But that goes to anyone working anywhere. And then, of course, there's like, and you can just play that game all day, right? But one of the things that I wanted to mention was like some of the more meta elements of it that you might not think of as math, but is math, right? It's just art, but it's math. And yeah, so let's get into that because, right, Severance is a very intentional show, right? Very intentional. Every color, every angle used, every shape, every position, position of different objects, positions of the actors, the lighting, the sound, the music, all of it very deliberate, all of it very intentional, all of it math. And I dig it. I dig it hard because like when you think about light and you think about sound, these are parts of the universe, right? They're inherently mathematical, both in what they are and their properties that come with those things, right? And how we use them. And I think that's very, very cool because like you can think of any like given scene. Like if we focus in like Lumen and like their office, right? Like we see a lot of white. We see specific things done with the space in that office, specific things done with the hallway and how they feel and how they make you feel and how they make the characters feel. Like all of it's strategic in universe and out of it. And I dig that. I dig that hard. And like I think one of the cool things too is like the camera work in Severance, right? Because not only is like everything like very, very clear, um, some of the angles that are used with the camera work. They paint a picture, tell a tale, and when you're in Lumen, they make you feel very restricted. And I think that's interesting. I think that's fascinating to me. And also, there's just like there's math in acting, and it's not just about the line reading. It's like how you're reading said line, though, and what the actors are doing, right? How close are they to one another? So you have that idea of distance. You have the idea of the volume in which they're talking, they're breathing, the different actions that they're taking. All of that is math in motion. Just because you didn't write it down doesn't make it not math, right? Or put a different way. You may not always write it down, but you're always doing the math. You may not always be conscious of it, but you're always doing the math. It's always there. It's doing some behind the scenes level stuff, right? And with Severance, it's like everything is so deliberate. And it's not just the angles that I was talking about with the camera work or the decisions that the actor are making. It's like everything you use to film, right? And I think that's cool, right? I think that's superb. And the idea of how like music and sound are used throughout, again, everything is very deliberate. And so I feel like you can play this game with just every conceivable part of Severance. And so at the time of recording, there are two seasons with a third one on the way. So far, there's two seasons, 19 episodes of varying length. And yeah, I look forward to it. And at this point, I am going to talk about a bit some things that are spoiler heavy and just how I feel about the show in general. And I have no idea if I'm going to start theorizing on you. I mean, I might. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so when it comes to Severance, I think, and this is also a mathematical thing too, but like the pacing, it's like, hey, why do you see like, this many episodes and why are we seeing like this episode this length and that length, right? Like these are all deliberate decisions and you're pacing out different parts of like the show, right? You're giving like these so you're laying out the mystery while developing the characters, and that pacing is important, right? And as you're solving different pieces of the puzzle while offering them new ones, and there's deliberation in that strategy, math, and I dig it. So I watch things back to back, like so I watched it aggressively, and I just like how it all like works out it is like a truly crazy show. It's like it's well acted, well written, well shot. Because you know, it's like I do respect a lot of the behind the scene choices, right? Um, and it's just bonkers because right, like throughout the course of the series, we get to know Mark, and we get to know Dylan and Irv and Helly, and we see like Mr. Milchek and Miss Cobell who are not severed, and we see how they interact with everyone, and it's just fascinating. And then like for the severed people, like we know their Audis, or you know, so we get used to these Indies, but their Audis are different. They have some similarities, but they're different. Like you know, like Mark for instance, like his Audi, like Audi Mark, is you know stricken with grief. But he's also kind of a jerk. But Andy Mark is very different. Like he's like a pretty upbeat. And with Dylan, you know, it's fascinating because you know he's like carefree to a degree, in his any form, but like his Audi form, you know, he's someone who has struggled with work, and taking care of his family, and so you know you have like him and his wife and him just trying to navigate it all. With Irv, like his whole life outside of it, like we don't see the full extent, but from what we see, he lives by himself, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I live by myself, but the difference is, for him, he doesn't seem to like have friends outside of work. So he has friends, but like because of how Severus works, he's not really aware that he has friends. You know, and the way that he tells it throughout the series is he just never really had that connection outside of work because of what we see, right? Um, and now and again, like I've said spoilers so many times throughout this, but let's talk about Helly R, uh, who turns out to be an Egan, you know, evil family that owns Lehman. Um, she's Helena Egan. So yeah, it's a bonkers thing, which is like when they revealed that at the end of season one, it's like okay, you can see it, but like if you're watching it, I don't think you necessarily assume that. If you did, I'd be curious to hear like why you thought that she might be an Egan if you did, because you know there's some evidence, right? There's some breadcrumbs. It's just like you wouldn't automatically, at least like I think most people wouldn't automatically assume. So in any case, like her case, like Helly's is an interesting case because you know, um, her Audi, Helena, again, like part of a big evil family that owns the company. She's second in line to run that joint, right? Like, and then she's effectively running that in her father's stead. He was still alive, still running things, but you know what I mean, right? Like she's second in command, but it's really like her show to a degree, right? And that's fascinating because you know she has her opinions on a lot of things. As Helena, but as Helly, it's fascinating because she doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to work. She doesn't want to play that game. She's rebellious. Very different, but it's a fascinating thing because you know you get into this idea of identity, right? And I think to me, it's just it's one of those fascinating topics to me, because right, like we all have how we were born into this world, right? But there's so many things that contribute to who we are, right? Because like we have our nature, just kind of like how we come into this world, how we are, but that is impacted by how we were raised, you know, our nurture. That's also impacted by how our desires, you know, our wants, as well as our needs. And just you know our experience, then the people we meet along the way, right? And there's so many other factors that that contribute to like who we are. And one of the fascinating things to me too is that like right, we're a continuum. We're not the same as when we were born. We grow and we never really stop changing even if we stop growing in the conventional sense, right? We are creatures constantly in flux. We are constantly in flux like this world is constantly in flux. We're just all used to it, right? It's like it's a bonkers thing though, right? And so I think just from that, right? Like we're not the same us as we were like let's say 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20, right? On those big levels, but really we're not even the same us that we were yesterday. We, you know, we just have a lot of common with that version, right? And what I think is very fascinating about Severance, and it's just like oh a little too close to home for a lot of people, is that idea that one you know you have that idea that you're going to be different around different people as well. Well, not everybody, but like a lot of people are going to be like different. Like they're going to be different at work than like let's say how they are with their friends and family, right? Like that's the thing. And so with Severance, it's like it's taking that idea of you wearing masks and you being different people around different people and taking it to its logical conclusion. Um, but what fascinates me is like since it's a little bit more crazy there. It's like, okay, so you have these people like who, if you're looking at the Audis, you have these people who they've been who they are all their life and they're this continuum, right? But they relate to themselves in that sense, right? It's like, well, hey, I recognize me as me, right? Um, and then what makes it crazy about the innies is like so from their perspective, right? They have their life. They don't know what's going on necessarily with their outies until we see different things in the series, right? But for them, you know, they were just they popped up, right? They were there. They were born and not having memories of their outside self, and all they know is work, which is busted. And they're forming memories, right? Like same starting point, like in the sense that is their Audi in the sense that like they come from the same place, they're in the same brain, but they're forming their own memories that the Audis are not going to have access to. They're forming their own connections with different people in the office, and they're different people, and that idea of like if they're people is a thing that's been consistent, like a theme that's been consistent throughout Severance. But like I think it's like different characters have that opinion, but like I think with the show, right? The idea is like yes, these are different people, and that complicates so much, and so it's like it's fascinating because when you get someone and they agree to severance, it's like they're not going to necessarily think of that person as a different person per se, right? But they are, and then it's like, well, now you have this being that is like has their own kind of continuum in that general sense that we all do, but now they're also split in two and that person is their own continuum, but it's all part of this like larger continuum in a sense, right? So it is wild, and the fact that we are dealing with different people, and this is like something that people have argued offline, and in the universe to an extent, is that like whoa, the idea of reintegration, where you're taking kind of like the Audi back in, or sorry, you're taking the NE back in, um, so it doesn't work, or at least like we haven't seen it work successfully because you're jamming two people. Like that's what some people have pointed out. Like right, you're jamming two people together, um, at that point. And so it's like it doesn't really quite work as well as you might think. And if you are going to like do the reintegration, you're not really like making them the person that they once were, because you've had two different people that have different memories and they know different people and their personalities are different and have evolved in different ways. And at the same time, you have this idea of just like what happens to us on a regular basis when you're not severed, right? Like you're growing and changing over time. You're not the same you that you were. And so you have these two beings that they're their own continuum on their own, and you're jamming them together. And it's like so even if you reintegrate them, right? It's like they're still not going to be that same person that they were just with new memories. There are two people that are going to be like a new being, or they're going to be two people just jumping back and forth, right? And so it's like it's a fascinating thing. And towards the end of season two, in particular, we see just how much like the Eddies want to stay alive, right? And it's a fascinating thing. And there's just so many different areas to explore, not just with identity, but like what's going to happen in the show. Like, and I have many things to say about that. But for whatever reason, as we're discussing this, and I was gonna bring it up later, but the goat thing, like, okay, so there's a goat room, right? And in season two, they show that they sacrifice the goats. It is deeply disturbing, among other deeply disturbing things in that show. But I don't think that that's the end of that, right? Because if it was just sacrifice, just like why have these people just like raise the goats continuously, have so many, and have like people whose innies are like specifically there just for that, right? I don't feel like that's the whole picture, right? But you can make that argument with like a whole lot of things, and like I'm just fascinated because like I mentioned it earlier, but like they were constructing like the whole thing with like macro data refinement. It was like they were working on different NAs, and it kind of flips the script on its head because like before it was like, oh well, we just have this idea that with Severance you have a bifurcation of the consciousness. The fact that like Gemma has different NAs and all that, it's like, well, it's more complex than that. And when you look at what they hope to achieve, it's still open ended, but it looks like they want to make someone who doesn't respond to anything emotionally. And the real question would be like, why? And it's like, okay, yes, evil corporation, okay, sure, but they already have a lot of power, and it's still. So what are they getting at there? Like, what's the bigger play? Is it something that's actually simple? Is it something that's way more complex? What's the case? And then it's just like, well, what's going to happen? That's the big thing, right? Because like for season one, for instance, right? Like I would have been mad if I watched that like live back in 2022 because like it ends in a way where there's a lot that's left unresolved. Like with season two, you can make an argument that yeah, a lot is still unresolved, but a lot of questions were answered. And it just makes me more curious. But now, that I'm caught up, I gotta wait just like everybody else. But in any case, right, it's a fascinating thing. And I think for me, just the whole Heli Helena thing is just like it's deeply fascinating. And just seeing how like the innies and outies are, like, it's like two sides of the same coin, and at the same time they're their own coin. It's like it's beautifully complex, and utterly fascinating. And I'm definitely curious to see where they go with things. And then like with Mr. Cobell, oh sorry, Miss Cobell and Mr. Milchek, um, and then like Natalie, who we see, is just like I'm definitely curious to see how they deal with Lumen, right? Because at least with Miss Cobell and Mr. Milchek, like as we see over the course of the series so far, rebellion is there. Miss Cobell, she's not even with the company anymore, and Mr. Milchek, he's running macro data refinement, but a lot of stuff has gone down. But like before season two let out, he made it clear he's not just going to be a pushover, and so it's like it's a fascinating thing too because like I mean we're dealing with like with those two characters like Cobell and Milchek. It's like we're dealing with like characters that do reprehensible things, but you also like seeing them rebel against that larger evil company. So it's like, ooh, I don't know if I'm rooting for y'all, but I'm not rooting for Lumen. So do you? um, but yeah, so I'm curious to see what happens to the characters, like the characters who have been severed, who have innies and outies, the characters who haven't, and how it all ties together. I look forward to it. And if you want to share your thoughts on Severance, yeah, please do. I'll see you in the future. Professor Prime out.